There comes a point in every man's life when he understands that respect is not freely given. Dignity is not something you are entitled to. Honor is not guaranteed. The people around you, some of them are observing closely, waiting, testing how much you will accept. That moment ends today. What you are about to hear is not guidance for the fragile. This is not motivation designed to make you feel comfortable. This is a framework built from disciplined strategy and applied psychological control. 7 ways to deal with those who show you disrespect. 7 techniques to make yourself difficult to challenge. By the end of this, you will not be the same man who started listening. You will become someone far more controlled. Someone who earns respect without requesting it. Pay attention. This is where the change begins. First method, learn the discipline of silence. The first tool you must develop costs nothing, yet it weakens your opponent entirely. Silence. When someone disrespects you, your instinct pushes you to react, to explain yourself, to argue, to respond with sharp words. That reaction is exactly what they are looking for. They want your focus. They want your emotional response. They want confirmation that they can influence how you feel. The moment you respond impulsively, you give them that advantage. Machiavelli recognized this long ago. A ruler who reacts to every insult is a ruler who loses control. You must become the man who answers disrespect with steady, deliberate silence. This is not silence born from fear. It is not the silence of someone who lacks confidence or words. It is the silence of a calculated observer, watching someone reveal their weakness through impatience. When you remain silent, you create an empty space. Inside that space, the other person is left alone with their doubt. They expected resistance. They were ready for anger, prepared for confrontation. What they did not expect was your silence. That silence unsettles them. It forces self-questioning. They replay the interaction repeatedly, wondering if they misjudged the situation. And they did. Most men depend on reaction. They believe strength comes from speaking louder, responding faster, or pushing harder. Real authority works differently. Real authority understands that silence communicates more than words ever could. Your lack of response signals that they are not worth your emotional investment. It shows that their opinion carries no influence in your world. It makes clear that you operate on a level they cannot reach. This is psychological pressure in its purest form. You do not debate with people who lack discipline. You do not explain yourself to someone who has already chosen disrespect. Instead, you withdraw your attention, your words, and your presence, leaving them to face the discomfort of realizing they failed to provoke you. Apply this deliberately. The next time someone disrespects you, remain quiet. Observe their expression. Notice the uncertainty. Feel the shift in control. That is the discipline of silence. That is your first tool. Second method, restrict access to your life. Understand this clearly. Your presence is not automatic. It is earned. Your time, focus, effort, conversation, and loyalty are valuable assets. They are not freely available to everyone. When someone disrespects you, they demonstrate that they no longer qualify for access to your world. This is where many men struggle. They tolerate poor treatment because they fear separation. They fear isolation. They fear the discomfort that comes from cutting ties. Machiavelli taught that when affection and respect cannot coexist, strength must take priority. In this case, it is better to stand alone than remain surrounded by those who do not value you. Removing access is not childish behavior. It is intentional. It signals that your life operates by standards. Anyone who fails to meet those standards is removed calmly, without conflict, without explanation, and without hesitation. This approach is firm, deliberate, and necessary. The disrespect was a test. They wanted to see how far they could push. By cutting them off completely, you send a clear message, not only to them, but to everyone observing. You do not negotiate with disrespect. You do not grant second chances to those who acted knowingly. Scarcity creates value. Constant availability erodes it. When you always forgive, always return, always overlook mistreatment, people stop respecting your boundaries. When access to you becomes limited, When your circle is controlled, when one mistake results in permanent removal, behavior changes. Your presence gains significance. People recognize what they risk losing. Do not announce your exit. Do not justify it. Simply remove yourself. Let them realize, over time, what they lost through their own actions. Your absence will communicate what your words never could. Restrict access. Protect your environment. Let the distance speak. Third method, rise beyond their influence. Revenge is often misunderstood. The most effective form of it is progress. The strongest response to disrespect is not confrontation, it is elevation. It is advancing so far that those who once dismissed you are no longer relevant. Every moment spent focusing on disrespect is time taken from your development. Every bit of anger drains energy that should be directed toward growth. Machiavelli understood that a wise leader does not waste resources on battles that provide no return. Instead, he builds. He strengthens. He expands until opposition no longer matters. This is your direction. Commit fully to self-improvement. Allow disrespect to sharpen your discipline. Pursue greater skill, greater understanding, greater stability, greater authority. While others discuss you, you advance. While they doubt your vision, you are constructing something lasting. Here is the reality of progress. As you rise, disrespect fades into background noise. Opinions from below lose their impact. Their words cannot reach you at the level you now operate. This is not about proving anyone wrong. It is about fulfilling your potential regardless of their judgment. Use their doubt as fuel. Use their behavior as motivation. Let every effort, every sacrifice, every disciplined decision be guided by one fact. You will not remain where others tried to confine you. When you reach the top, explanation will not be required. Achievement speaks clearly on its own. They will see the outcome. They will recognize the mistake they made. Rise beyond their reach. That is lasting control. Fourth method, allow their actions to reveal them. When disrespected, the instinct to retaliate is strong. Many feel compelled to expose flaws immediately, to attack publicly, to strike back without restraint. Resist that impulse. Strategic thinking avoids direct conflict. It observes first. One of Machiavelli's core principles is patience. Those driven by ego eventually undermine themselves. Individuals who disrespect others lack restraint. They are motivated by insecurity and the need for dominance. These same traits will expose them over time. Your role is not to accuse. It is to observe. One incident does not define them, but repeated behavior does. Given enough freedom, they will repeat the same actions with others. They will create conflict. They will damage relationships. Gradually, their reputation will reflect their character. You do not need to interfere. Step back and allow events to unfold naturally. This approach requires discipline, but it is effective. Their behavior becomes the evidence. At times, you can accelerate this process by placing them in situations where their true nature is visible. Ask neutral questions. Remain calm. Let contrast do the work. While you remain composed, their lack of control becomes obvious. People notice. They always do. When one person maintains dignity and the other loses it, conclusions form without accusation. This method requires patience and emotional regulation. Delayed outcomes are often stronger outcomes. Exposure achieved through behavior is more convincing than any claim you could make. Accusations invite doubt. Self-inflicted consequences leave no room for defense. So remain observant. Allow space. Let time work in your favor. When the result arrives, you will remain unaffected, validated not by argument, but by outcome. Patience is not passivity. It is a strategic advantage. Fifth method, manage perception. Reality is not defined solely by events. It is defined by how those events are understood. This principle has shaped history, shifted power, and determined outcomes for centuries. Machiavelli recognized that perception determines authority. Whoever shapes the narrative shapes the result. When disrespect occurs, a story begins forming immediately. They are attempting to establish dominance. They are presenting you as weak, as someone who can be treated without consequence. If their version of events remains unchallenged, the conflict is already decided before you even recognize it has begun. This is where psychological strategy gives you an advantage. You do not need to argue. You do not need to defend yourself with emotional explanations. Instead, you must intentionally guide how others understand the situation. This is not deception. This is focus. This is framing. This is ensuring that the version of the truth that benefits you is the one that spreads. How is this done? First, remain composed. The moment emotion takes control, you give the other person the opportunity to portray you as unstable, reactive, or guilty. Calm behavior signals clarity. Calm behavior signals confidence. Calm behavior forces observers to question why one person is agitated while the other remains steady. Second, communicate selectively. Speak to the appropriate people at the appropriate time, not to complain, not to spread rumors, but to introduce perspective. A few carefully chosen statements, shared with the right individuals, can shift how an entire group interprets what happened. Third, allow your actions to reinforce your position. While they speak recklessly, you continue to perform with consistency and professionalism. Your conduct becomes evidence. People place more trust in what they observe than in what they are told. When behavior contradicts the narrative being pushed against you, uncertainty begins to form. Uncertainty spreads. Uncertainty weakens their position. Those who understand power have always known this principle. Conflicts are often resolved not through confrontation, but through perception. Reputations are protected not by facts alone, but by how those facts are presented. You must think like a strategist managing perception rather than force. Every word, every decision, every silence becomes a calculated move. The other person may have initiated the narrative, but you determine how it ends. You shape the story until you are seen as composed, grounded, and principled, while they are remembered for overreach and poor judgment. Control perception. Control outcomes. This is the system. Learn it, or be controlled by it. Sixth method, target what matters, their reputation. There are moments when silence is no longer sufficient. There are times when progress alone does not restore balance. In those moments, action is required. However, a disciplined individual does not act impulsively. He does not use force. He applies pressure where it has lasting impact, reputation. Machiavelli emphasized that reputation is the foundation of authority. Financial loss can be recovered. Position can be regained. Reputation, once damaged, is rarely restored. It determines access, trust, and influence. When someone disrespects you, they risk their standing against yours. They assume there will be no consequences. Your role is to ensure that assumption is costly. This is not about spreading rumors. It is not about gossip or personal attacks. Those methods lack discipline and strategy. Effective reputation influence operates through contrast. It exposes weaknesses by highlighting consistency, integrity, and restraint. When you act with principle, their lack of principle becomes visible. When you show reliability, their unreliability stands out. When you remain composed, their immaturity is amplified. You do not attack, you reflect. Their behavior reveals itself without accusation. There is an additional layer to this strategy. Power is built through alliances. No one exists independently. The individual who disrespected you relies on relationships, approval, and social support. This is where strategic thinking applies. You do not confront them directly. You build credibility around them. You become valuable to those they depend on. You demonstrate reliability, professionalism, and character in environments where they cannot control perception. Over time, comparisons form naturally. Doubt begins to surface, not because of false information, but because your presence highlights reality. Eventually, their own network begins to distance itself. Trust weakens. Influence declines. Isolation follows. This process appears organic, but it is the result of deliberate positioning. This approach is methodical, quiet, and effective. It is not driven by emotion. It leaves no evidence of intent. They will feel the impact without being able to identify its source. Their assumption of safety becomes their error. They will search for someone to blame. They will not find you, but they will understand. Seventh method, develop indifference, the highest form of control. Everything discussed leads to this final stage. This is not another tactic. It is the endpoint. It is where authority becomes permanent. Complete indifference. Disrespect causes pain only when validation is still needed. It affects you when another person's opinion holds value. Dependence on external approval creates vulnerability. As long as that dependence exists, emotional control remains outside your reach. Remove that dependence, and control returns to you. When opinions lose significance, reactions disappear. When someone attempts to provoke you and receives no emotional response, no anger, no resentment, no desire for retaliation, you become unreachable. This is the highest application of psychological discipline. The individual who requires nothing cannot be manipulated. The one who has detached from approval cannot be controlled by it. Indifference is not avoidance. It is resolution. It requires confronting the need for acceptance and removing it. It requires rebuilding identity around internal values rather than external feedback. When this shift occurs, your presence changes. Others notice it. Attempts to provoke you fail. Familiar tactics lose effectiveness. You respond with the same emotional investment you would give to an object without meaning. At that point, control is complete. This is not suppression. It is independence. Stability comes from within. Authority comes from within. Peace comes from within. When that state is reached, influence follows naturally. The world will always contain disrespectful individuals. That no longer matters. You are no longer participating in the cycle. You observe without involvement. True power is not wealth. It is not status. It is not recognition. True power is emotional independence. Machiavelli wrote of conquest through force. But mastery of the self surpasses all external victories. When you control your mind, outside influence loses power. You are now stable. You are now complete. You are now free. You now possess 7 tools few will ever develop. Apply them deliberately. Use them with discipline. If this resonated with you, write one phrase in the comments, I am untouchable. Engage with the channel. Subscribe and enable notifications to continue developing this mindset. Many will ignore this message. Few will apply it. Respect is never given. It is established.